In this video, I am going to demonstrate how to create a histogram in Excel. There are several ways to create this histogram. I am going to create it as a column chart. One can create a histogram directly, but I find that the histogram chart type doesn't provide enough flexibility in order with the chart to warrant using it. So I have some data, monthly sales data, and I am going to use the technique in the box and whiskers chart to decide what range of buckets I would like to use in my histogram. So a histogram shows you a picture of your distribution, and the picture it gives you is for various buckets. It shows you how many observations are within each bucket. So I am going to exclude outliers from my histogram so that my histogram does not go too far down or too far up. I'm going to use the technique for the box and whiskers chart to compute my outliers. So I need my quartiles. Quartile X of my array, my data, which is sales data, and the first quartile, second and third quartile. The interquartile range is the third minus the first. The outliers are quartile 3 plus 1.5 times the interquartile range, or quartile 1 minus 1.5 times the interquartile range. So anything above any observations in my data set above 156.38 or below 37.38 are going to be excluded. I am going to create some buckets. The first bucket is anything below 37.38, and then I'm going to create 20 equally spaced buckets. So I'm going to take the 37.38 plus the difference between my outliers divided by 20. I forgot to lock my references. I'm using the F4 key on a Windows machine. I think that's Command T or Apple T on a Mac. So my bucket is the lowest level. This bucket is going to represent any observations between 43 and 37. And then here are all my observations. Here in this bucket is going to be everything between 156.38 and 150.43. So those are my buckets. I'm going to select this range, and I'm going to use the frequency function. This takes my data array, so sales, bracket, sales, close bracket. So that's all of my data. You can see it highlighted on the left. And I'm going to take the second parameter, are my buckets. This is an array formula, so I do Control Shift Enter, and that gives me the count of how many observations are within the particular buckets. I actually prefer to see the percentage of observations within a particular bucket, so I take the count and I divide it by the count of my observations, which will be sales, sales, close. So one observation is 2%, 2.08% of all observations. 6 observations is 12.5% of all of my observations. And now I'm ready to create my chart. I'm going to select my data that I want to graph. I'm going to insert a column chart. We'll do a 2D column. We'll pull it up a little bit, make it a little bit bigger. And now we need to worry about formatting this chart. First thing, we notice that the x-axis labels don't represent the buckets. I am going to fix this by clicking on Select Data, and you can see the horizontal axis labels are just the numbers 1 through 5, 1 and so on. So I'm going to edit that, the axis label range, I'm going to select my buckets. Click OK, and now we can see our axis labels make a little bit more sense. As with every chart, we need a proper title. So histogram of monthly sales. We need axis titles. So we'll add our axis titles. I can double click. We'll call this buckets. And we'll call this percentage. And now we have a reasonably formatted histogram of our monthly sales.